Here we go. So, getting ready now for Pesach Sheni to is on Thursday night, Friday, the 14th, and getting ready. Today is actually the Rebbe's brother's yahrzeit. His name was
Rabbi,
Rabbi Yisrael Aryeh Leib, who's buried in Sfas. He passed away in 1952. Tafshin Yud Beis on the 13th of Iyar, and he is Mir Hashem, God willing, all being well. I'm going to be able to quickly get into a car and drive up to Tzfat to be a few minutes by the Rebbe's brother and daven for the chevra and for my family, for Klal Yisrael, and especially for the guys in University District Minyan. So you could send me if you have any you want me to read up there, you could send it to me by a private message. So if you name it, you etc. So this week's parsha we have a few things. We have first of all l'chaim, baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. L'chaim. So again, we have the Rebbe's brother's yahrzeit tonight. Yisrael Aryeh Leib. We'll speak a little about him. He was and again, I'm not an expert in math, but evidently he was the Rebbe had his work on mathematics published, worked over by an expert after he was married. The Rebbe says that his notes. The Rebbe's actually talking about this at a public farbrengen. The Rebbe says that his notes were very on a high level of I guess of the science of the math. And so the Rebbe asked someone if he could take it and kind of simplify it and put it into a publication. And I believe it was published as the works of the Rebbe Yisrael Aryeh Leib, and it was based on his knowledge of math. He was a professor of math, I believe, and he was a professor, I think, in Eretz Yisrael, and also as well he lived in Tel Aviv after the war, as well as I think in Liverpool. He passed away. He was in Liverpool. But he literally passed away a year or so after the Rebbe became Rebbe. The Rebbe accepted leadership in 1951, Tafshin Yud Aleph, and he passed away a little bit over a year after the Rebbe officially accepted leadership on the 13th of Iyar, Tafshin Yud Beis. The Rebbe sat yahrzeit for him. The Rebbe also, we know that when he passed away, the Rebbe didn't want that the Rebbe's mother, their mother, should know of his passing officially. Why? Because she was an elderly lady who suffered a lot in her life, and she suffered from her husband was sent to exile in Uzbekistan, far out there in a really this horrible situation. The Russian government, the Soviet government sent him there for spreading Yiddishkeit and for being a Rav and paskening, etc. So they sent him to this horrible exile that really took its toll tremendously on the Rebbe's father's life, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak. And he was released from this exile, that his wife, Rebbe Chana, went with him. She didn't have to, she wasn't sent there, but she voluntarily to be with her husband. He passed away very shortly afterwards because it took its physical toll on the Rebbe's father's physical. So being that she was through so much, the Rebbe came in 1947 to France to bring her. She got out after the war to bring her to the United States. The Rebbe's brother, Yisrael Aryeh Leib, which was younger than the Rebbe, he would write to the Rebbe he'd write to the Rebbe's mother, Rebbe Simchan, every day, I think, a letter. So the Rebbe continued to post letters in his handwriting as if he was writing, so his mother shouldn't know that he passed away. The Rebbe was sitting shiva, like you sit shiva for a brother. But the Rebbe had a custom every day to visit his mother. So the Rebbe made sure to, even during the shiva, to change his shoes, to put on regular shoes, because when you're a mourner, you wear mourner's shoes, but he didn't want his mother to know. And he continued to be with her, that she shouldn't know that he passed away. Obviously, whether she really knew or not, we don't know. But that's not it's not an uncommon thing when someone's an elderly woman and children pass away, and it's just going to do harm, to better not tell them. Either way, then that went on from 1952 until the Rebbe's mother passed away in 65. That's a long time. Okay, so the Yisrael Leib himself was a big, not just a scholar in mathematics, but he's also was a tremendous Talmud Chacham in the Rebbe's Rishimus, in the Rebbe's talks that I have over here. The Rebbe's not talks, the Rebbe's memoirs. The Rebbe has his own memoirs called the Rishimus. So the Rebbe's Rishimus, it actually talks about Yisrael Ayuleib, that so we tell the story in honor of Yisrael Ayuleib, again, L'chaim, Neshama Shav and Aliyah, and should be Meretz Yosher, and for all the Rebbes in Yanu, and you should go to the Rebbe and tell the Rebbe he has to come here and with Mashiach Tzidkenu now. L'chaim.
Amen.
Tell his brother, the Chaver are waiting. So the Rebbe writes in his Rishimus, in his notes, that he went in one morning to the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe's father-in-law, and the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe's father. The previous Rebbe relates to the Rebbe about a vision he had, including his father, that he went into his father's room, and I believe the previous Rebbe was wearing a new hat, and the Rebbe Rashab, this is after the passing of the Rebbe Rashab, so it's a vision he had after the passing, and the next morning he's telling the Rebbe this vision he had. So he goes into the Rebbe into the Rebbe Rashab, the Friedrich Rebbe goes into the Rebbe Rashab in his vision, and he has a new hat on, and I think the Rebbe Rashab commented him on his new hat. And then he said in Yiddish, let in the rest. So there was in this vision there were other people on the outside of the door. They opened the door, and a group of small chassidim came into the Rebbe Rashab, and the Rebbe Rashab was looking in this vision, and one of them had a hat that was kind of covering his head, a fedora hat, like the Rebbe would wear with, like, I think a toothpick or something, a cigarette in his mouth. And the Rebbe Rashab said, "Who's that?" And then the Rebbe Rashab says, "Oh, I know him well." And the Friedrich Rebbe tells the Rebbe, that was your brother. His brother, the Rebbe's brother, was in the dream that was allowed in to go listen, and the Friedrich Rebbe heard Chassidus from his father. So we see that we didn't know he was a very special Yid, that if it's a vision, it's not just a dream. A dream that you have of a Rebbe is not by chance. Like my teacher told me, Rabbi Deitch, used to tell me that if you have a dream of the Rebbe, it's because the Rebbe chooses to come to you in your dream. So that's the Rebbe coming to a dream. But here you have a vision of a Rebbe. The Rebbe himself, the previous Rebbe, had the dream as Rebbe. Means it's not just a dream. It's a situation that happened in a vision. And in that vision was the Rebbe's brother listening to the Rebbe Rashab saying Chassidus. And the Rebbe says, so much so that the Friedrich Rebbe told the Rebbe, "I have regards from your brother." And the Rebbe was wondering when the Rebbe Rashab said that, because his brother was alive, that maybe he received a letter. He didn't know what the Friedrich Rebbe was saying. He has regards from his brother. He has regards from the vision that he had. Also this week is Pesach Sheni. Second Pesach is an amazing holiday. And like the previous Rebbe says, the message of Pesach Sheni is nishtakein farfallen. It's never too late. It's the central message of a chassid, of a yid, that notwithstanding anything that's happened in our life, the law of Pesach Sheni was that there were people that became impure, because they got into contact with death. Meaning to say, the Chachamim, the Gemara is asked the question: who are these people? There's either people who say it was the people that took Nadav and Avihu out of the Mishkan when there was when they died, so they had to put them out, so they became Tamei. There's different questions about who the people were that were Tamei. But the fact is, they became Tamei Tumei Smeis. Means they came in contact with somebody who passed away, which is the highest level of Tumah, the most deep and effect, and so to say penetrative Tumah is Tumah Smeis, is Tumah of death. And here the people that are Tameim L'Nefesh Adam, that's how Tamei they were, and they come to Moshe Rabbeinu in the desert on Pesach, and they say Lama Negara. Why should we be left out? We're not allowed to sacrifice the Paschal lamb because we're impure, l'nefesh Adam. We became impure to death. But why should we not be able to do the Paschal lamb? Why are we left out? And Moshe says, well, we have to ask God. And God says, they're right. They're right. And therefore, if a person is tamei or very far, means too far to come to the temple, and other conditions that you couldn't be there for the first Passover, so then you have an opportunity to sacrifice the second Passover. And in the pasuk, it doesn't say just two people, like let's say the story where the people were doing a favor. They were doing the Chava Kadisha kind of. They were taking the people out. They didn't do anything wrong. But when the pasuk talks about when the pasuk talks about let's see the pasuk over here. The pasuk talks about. It says the pasuk in Bahaloscha. It's actually by Midbar 9. Verse 6. So they came to Aaron, he said, we're Tomei. So he said, Moshe says, let's see what God's going to say. What does God say? God says, Dabar b'nei Yisrael, speak to the Jewish people. What should you tell them? Ish, any man, any person. The nefesh, you become impure. You're in a far place. Lachem, even if it's by choice. That's the previous Rebbe says. Even if you're in a situation where you're spiritually far from God, where you're impure, and it's your choice. No one forced you. You did it by choice. You've made choices that weren't right in life. And a person may say, well, if I became impure by chance or out of my control, if I was an ones, I was forced, as part of a Chevra Kadisha, I was taking out Nadav and Avihu. Okay, so God gives us a second chance. But here the Torah says, no, that's not the condition. Even if that was the story that inspired it, that's not the condition. But even if you're Tamei and you're Derech Rechaika, you're far, and it's Lachem, it's by choice, you have an opportunity to do a second Pesach. Nishda kein farfalin. It's never too late. There's no situation that tells a person, you're not part of Klal Yisrael. You're not part of the fold of the Jewish people, and you don't have an opportunity to be included. Not just that you're a member of the Jewish people, to be included in the Paschal sacrifice, in the opportunity of celebrating Pesach, in the idea of celebrating freedom, in the idea of celebrating Yetzias Mitzrayim. You have that chance, and that's the message of Pesach Sheni, which is happening tomorrow night. And interesting, when the Rebbe talks in the talks, Pesach Sheni is a replica of the first Pesach. So first of all, there's a few things. Number one is that when should you really eat them up? What are the customs that we do on Pesach Sheni today? One is that we don't say Tachnun on Friday. Thursday afternoon by Mincha we say Tachnun. That's clearly in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, in the Alter Rebbe Siddur. When he lists off the days we don't say Tachnun, and the days prior, like Erev, so the Erev of Rosh Hashanah, for instance, we say Tachnun. The Erev, but Erev Lag BaOmer we don't say Tachnun. But Erev, Pesach Sheni, we say Tachnun. Why? Because Pesach Sheni is only really going from the 14th into the 15th. If Mashiach is going to come, which is the second point, the Rebbe discusses that today's the 13th. And Pinchas, although you're sitting there in Seattle, and I'm sitting here for bringing together you and I and those who are on YouTube. So we have that even if you're sitting in Seattle, and today on the 13th, Mashiach, God willing, Elijah the prophet makes a quick announcement, and then Mashiach comes. Technicalities of how that works, that he has to come a day earlier. But let's say Mashiach, we're not sure how many people have to hear Elijah's announcement. But Bonagid Mir Hashem Mashiach comes in the next 30 odd hours, right? So you have until midday on the 14th, and quickly the Mesa Migdash comes down from heaven, and it goes in its place on Temple Mount. And it goes right there where it's supposed to be on Temple Mount. That's where the Holy of Holies is going to be. That's where the Jewish temple is going to be, the third temple. It's going to come down as prophesied in Yecheskel and told, and the tradition of the Jewish people and what we've been praying for the past 2,000 years. That we say we want to see Zion. It's not talking about coffee in Cafe Ramon or in Cafe Hillel on the streets of Yerushalayim. That's also nice. But that's not V'sechazan. We want to see to return to Zion means with the temple, and like we say, that we should be able to be zeicha to do the temple, the service in the temple, as Hashem wants it to be, and as you say in davening. Every time we say we say it many times a day, and we say after we screamed a month ago after the Seder Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim. That means next year we should do the service in the temple for Pesach Sheni, for the Pesach. But if Mashiach is going to come and the temple is going to come down from heaven, so there's an opinion that says that we still will do the Pesach Sheni. Why? Because we didn't do the first Pesach. Even though we didn't do the first Pesach, the temple wasn't standing. So it's not so simple because there's a lot of debate. What is the technicalities of Pesach Sheni? If there has to be a first Pesach or not. And the same thing applies to other questions. The question applies, for instance, if a person is to convert between the first and second Pesach. If a person was a non-Jew, a Gentile, in the first Passover, so he couldn't do a Passover, the halacha is a Gentile is not allowed to sacrifice the Paschal sacrifice. So much so we have a story of Rabbi Yehuda ben Seir, I believe, that sent that a Gentile came and they didn't allow him. A Gentile's not allowed that. The Gentile's allowed to give other sacrifices, and we accept sacrifices from Gentiles, and there's no, but not the Paschal sacrifice. This is a simcha for the Jewish people who were in Galus. So you have to be part of the Jewish people to celebrate the Geula, the redemption. Doesn't mean to be a convert, you're part of the Jewish people. But a Gentile doesn't do the Paschal sacrifice. But if a person converts and becomes a full-fledged Jew between Pesach Rishon and Pesach Sheni, so now you're a full-fledged Jew. So what do? I didn't do the first Passover because I wasn't Jewish. Do I have an obligation to do the second Passover? So to would apply about a question of a person became bar mitzvah. That happens all the time. A person's born between Pesach, so you weren't obligated in the mitzvahs in the first Passover, and now it's the second Passover. Are you obligated to serve the second Passover? So there's all these kind of questions, and this question also applies if Mashiach comes. Mashiach comes and the temple comes down, and we quickly grab a few sheep and lamb. We go to Temple Mount. We go to sacrifice the Paschal lamb. There's an opinion that says we would sacrifice the Paschal lamb. So that's Emer Hashem. That's God willing. We'll find out. Elijah the prophet, in all the different things, he's going to be busy. He's going to be busy answering this question as well. What's the law? Mashiach comes, Emer Hashem, about in the next 30-something hours. I say 30-something hours because once it's midday in Jerusalem, past the time. Past Shkia, it's too late to do the second Passover. So Mashiach has a short window still to come, but he can't come. There's enough time for the temple and for us to grab a few sheep and to do a Paschal lamb. But Elijah will tell us what to do. But in the event Chas v'Shalom that doesn't happen, we still celebrate second Pesach. What do? We eat matzah. Everyone knows that everyone has hopefully a little bit of matzah left over. And I'm sure in the University District Minyan, they maybe have a little matzah on the side. You're supposed to try to eat a little bit of matzah on the second Passover. The question is, when do we eat it? Do we eat it tomorrow night, meaning Thursday night, which is going into the 14th, which is technically Pesach Sheni? Or do we really eat it during the day of the 14th? Or do we eat it in the evening of the 14th, going into the 15th? Because if we had the Paschal lamb, and we have it, Mr. Shem, and we eat it, matzah Emor Yachlu, we're supposed to eat it to the matzah and the mar like we would eat it the first Passover, we would be eating it at the evening of going into the 15th. So if we're eating matzah, the best would really to eat it at your meal Friday night. At the custom, Minyan Yisrael Torah, to be eating matzah ready a little earlier, you could eat it on the 14th by night. You could eat it 14th by day. No one's going to arrest you for that. But if you want to do it 100%, the Rabbi mentions that maybe possibly the idea is to eat it really towards the evening of the 15th, because that's when you would do the Paschal lamb. So we have Pesach Sheni, which the message is Nishtakim Farfalens. No, it's never too late. That alone, we could sit there and we could bring a whole night and say, listen, we all know that there's been situations that we've been far, and there's been situations that we were impure, and there's been situations, and there are situations that it's been lachem, it's been by choice. It's not because it happened to us or we were out of control. It's not that we weren't involved in the choices that made us far and made us tamei, made us impure. But nevertheless, Nishtakim Farfalens, it's never too late. So that itself is something that should give simcha to a person that's tremendous. The simcha that we know that it's never too late. And here we have an idea, very much, this week's Parsha is very much connected to the whole situation of the month of Iyar, because this week's Parsha Emor talks about, primarily we have the laws of the holidays. The laws of the holidays, just really broken down from the beginning to end, including the laws of counting the Omer, is mentioned in this week's Parsha, and the laws of Bikurim, the laws of Passover, and the laws of the Rosh Hashanah, and the laws of Yom Kippur, and the laws of Sukkot, and the laws of the four species. So all this is mentioned in all the biblical holidays are mentioned in this week's Torah portion. So that's really the base, the chunk of this week's Parsha. That's huge. So, but aside from that, we also have this week's Parsha starts off with talking about the laws of purity. It talks about the idea that a kohen has to stay pure. And who's a kohen? One of the laws about a kohen becoming impure, we know the laws that a kohen doesn't go to the cemetery. There's only specific situations where a kohen is allowed to become impure, and the high priest is never allowed to become impure. But you have for the she'era, for your wife and for your parents, and for them, the Torah says another condition. The Torah adds like this. If we open up and we're going to connect this back to Pesach Sheni, and a little bit of Lag BaOmer, and a little bit of the times we're living in, and then that's going to be our Farbrengen for today. So Parshas Bayit says the laws like this. It's not Parshas Bayit, sorry, Parshas Emor. Parshat Emor, it says, Emor HaKohen b'nei Aaron, right? That's how the Parsha starts off. Say to Aaron, to the Kohen, the sons of Aaron, the Nefesh le'tama b'amav. You're not allowed to become impure. That's the way the Torah starts off. You can't just go to cemetery. You have to stay Torah, which is very much connected already with Pesach Sheni. Because the whole thing of Pesach Sheni was someone who was Tam le'nefesh Adam, someone who was impure. So when can you become pure? So it says, the Torah says there are times when a kohen does become impure. The she'erei hakarivei love, to your close relative. In this case, the Rashi says that she'erei means your wife. A person who's a kohen who's married obviously goes to become impure and participate in the funeral of his wife. L'imay l'aviv, to his father and to his mother. Why do we say the male? Because this law is only applicable to the male. It's not obligatory to the woman kohen. To your son and to your daughter, and your brother. That's the verse 2, chapter 21. Then the Torah continues, verse 3 of chapter 21. Torah goes into a whole long description. But what about your sister? The Torah doesn't mention your sister. So now the Torah says, okay, to your sister who's a virgin, close to you, who's never been with another man, lo yitama, then you should be, the Gemara learns, lo yitama, you have to also become impure for her. For your sister who's a virgin, who's close to you, who's never been with another man. Torah says an amazing thing. The Zohar teaches us that this, we know a lot of the psukim, the verses in Song of Shir Shirim, is the different relationships that Hashem has with the Jewish people. And a lot of the relationships described by King Solomon of Hashem and the Jewish people is a relationship of love. So it could be the love between husband and wife. There's the love between a brother and a sister. There's the love between a father and a child. There's different love. There's different level, like it says, Pischuli Achaisi, Rayasi, Tamasi. So there's different levels of relationship. So when it says hapsula krayvei love is also talking about God. That God is like a kohen. The Gemara says God's like a kohen. Kechem kohen, who God is a kohen. But God, so it means a kohen has to stay pure. But when his young sister, who wasn't with another man, what does it mean to be with another man? Who's the ish? Another man is talking about Esav ish hasada, Esav, man of the field. But she's tameh. Even if she's tameh, la yitama, you have to go become impure for her. And that's even Hashem comes, and when it comes time, the Zohar says this is talking about the days of Mashiach. And Hashem has to come take his young sister out of Galus, out of exile, even though we're in the mud, even though we're tameh l'nefesh Adam, we're impure. And even if it was lachem, but we still, our weaknesses doesn't mean that we sold ourselves to Esav, the man of the field. We've had moments of bad decisions. We've had moments of things that we have to correct. But Hashem says, for my sister, the virgin who's never been with another man, not with Esav, stayed true to me. God comes and says, God goes in, soils himself, bloodies himself. Zohar says he encloses himself in the garments of vengeance to bring the Klal Yisrael out of Galus. And not only that, like the Rebbe talked in 1962, the Rebbe said that the Rebbe, that why does God look around? Why does God have to do it? Just like God had to do it in Egypt, because no one else is going to do it. No one else is taking the Jewish people out of Galus. All the confusion, all the narratives, all the things saying what's right and what's wrong. There's so much Hashem says enough is enough of the Galus. Enough of all this killing and all this enough of hate against Judaism, against Torah, against Yiddishkeit, against the Mashiach. It says, La Yitama, God comes in and pulls us out of Galus. And he changes the world, he brings the world to a higher place. And the Rebbe, the Zohar says even more that the reason why God goes into Galus is not because when he goes in there, he also elevates the sparks. The sparks come by fact. God goes into Galus to get the Jewish people out. He goes in, he takes Pinchas out, and he takes Mendy out, and he takes the other Yid out, and the Yid could be lost anywhere. No matter where that person is, in New York, in Alaska, in Montana, in Idaho, in Europe, in Far East, there's no place in the world God's not going to take that Yid. Lo Taman, bring that person out of Galus. And that's really connection right away. From the beginning of the Parsha to Pesach Sheni. Nishtakin Farfallen, there's no person that's lost. And the Parsha also ends with such a message. The Parsha ends with the message of the story of the Makallel, the person who curses Hashem. It's a hard story. We talked about this in the years past. It's a hard story. There was a person that wanted to find a place where that person could be part of Klal Yisrael. The person said, my mother's from the tribe of Dan. My father was an Egyptian. The Torah testifies that this was the only child that was born from an interfaith relationship. Although she was molested, we know who she was. She was Shleimus Bas Divri. This is the same Egyptian who Moshe killed. Moshe killed the Egyptian, right? He kills the Egyptian. Who's the Egyptian? The Rashi says it was Shleimus Bas Divri. That she kind of was a bit of flirtatious. And he got the attention. Didn't mean that she deserved to be molested, and he came in to molest her. And Moshe killed him. But from that molestation was born this person. And he wanted to be part of his mother's tribe. His mother was from the tribe of Dan. And there's different opinions about how did he know only then that he was from the Egyptian. There's all these different ideas we talked about in years past about his mother's husband was Dasan, and only after the story of Korach did they realize that he was he wasn't from the relationship of Dasan, he was from the relationship of the Egyptian, he was from the rape. But the fact is he wanted to move into his mother's tent, in mother's tribe, and the tribe of Dan said you don't belong. And they kicked him out. He went to Moshe and he said he doesn't belong. So he cursed Hashem. It's a Makallel. But they stoned him to death. So it's not an easy story. It wasn't like he came from deep frustration where he doesn't do that. He doesn't disconnect himself. But the Rebbe asked, why does the Torah tell us this story? And you want to tell us the story of the person who cursed Hashem? Why do you have to tell us the whole story, that his mother, who she was, her name was Shleimus Bas Divri. And she was the only person that she was flirtatious, and that brought the attention, whether it's right or wrong. We're not going to get into the discussion of a level of responsibility here. But why would the Torah tell us of these details? That she was that either way, that she was not a tznuah, she wasn't a modest Jewish woman. So the Rebbe says an amazing thing to show that the idea is that if from this we could bring people closer in a proper closeness to Hashem, where the Jewish girl says, "Look, this is not how a Jewish woman behaves. It's not the beauty of a Jewish woman is that she's in her modesty and in being a keres habais, getting ready to build a home, and having Jewish values." So even though it's in the same time it's teaching us a little bit negative about her, Shleimus Bas Divri herself, but the very fact that because of her, others are going to make better choices, so she herself gets an elevation. It elevates her mission. That something good came from her behavior that helped others to learn, and not just that. The Rebbe says that it's not just that she was able to inspire others. Others people, because the Jewish people are horrible. She's part of the Jewish people. So, but if the Jewish people are getting an elevation, she personally gets an elevation, not just because she helped others get inspired. It's good for her that the Jewish people are on a higher level. But the point is, it's all about inclusiveness. Everything about this week's parsha is that God is ready to become impure for the Jewish people. That He comes and takes his sister out of Galus, And the idea that even Shlomis Bas Divri, it's an elevation for her, that she's able to teach Klal Yisrael to have higher morals. And the idea that is in general, the Nishtah came for fall, it's never too late. So to finish off, that the Rebbe says, quotes the other Zohar that says that there's a great light, the light that comes down on Pesach Rishon, on the 14th of Nisan, shines straight through to Pesach Sheni for 30 days. For 30 days we have this light, the light of Geula, of redemption. So there was a lot of people who've been disheartened and said, oh, Mashiach was supposed to come on Pesach. Mashiach is going to come when he's going to come. The Rebbe says Mashiach is coming any second. The gates of the walls of Galus are burning. Mashiach Ba were mamish in the generation of Geula. But at the same time, the Rebbe, this idea of that Pesach passed and Geula passed, Geula didn't pass. Geula never passes. But even the Geula of Pesach, the Zohar says, it shines straight for 30 days. Today's Tanya, meaning the 13th of Eir's Tanya, is the Tanya about the idea of Yetzias Mitzrayim. Yetzias Mitzrayim means to leave limitations. And that's why we say Yetzias Mitzrayim in the Shema, because leaving limitations is when you accept the oneness of Hashem. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, you accept the yoke, that's true freedom. So we connect the Shema to the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim in the third paragraph of the Shema. And then the Zohar continues that on the 14th of Iyar, the skies open up and a new light shines for 7 days. We're mamish getting ready to go into a huge new level of revelation. And hopefully that revelation that the Zohar is referring to is not just a revelation that's going to be something hidden, but we should see that revelation with a shine coming throughout the world that's going to be emanating from the Beis HaMikdash on Temple Mount. That's going to come out, that like it says, the windows of temple go outwards to bring light out, not to bring light in. From the Beis HaMikdash is going to be or light shining throughout Jerusalem, throughout Eretz Yisrael, throughout the world. And all the nations of the world, all that hate and confusion, everyone's going to put their guns down. Everyone's going to put their machine guns down. Everyone's going to take off their hate, undress themselves, their dirty clothing of hate and jealousy. And all the negativity is going to be put away, and we're going to all march together, the whole world, to Yerushalayim HaKodesh, to sacrifice with the great light, with the coming Mashiach Tzidkenu. Thank you, Pinchas, for being my chavrusa tonight. L'chaim.
Oh, thank you, Rabbi. L'chaim.
Take care.
Thank you.
And have good Shabbos.